Welcome, everybody, back to the second episode of our new BS series. If you missed last week, that is Benton and Sutherland's behavioral science bullshit. So BS cubed, if you might. We've got Rory along with us today to be chatting about more behavioral science topics that are relevant in the world. So hello, Rory.
Hello there.
So first off, we're going to be chatting about a recent post of mine that I put up with the topic of Heinz-sight. It's a recent story that's come about, and it's how Heinz identified the exact Pantone of red in their ketchup because they found that a lot of small businesses would buy the Heinz bottles. When they ran out, they'd end up just refilling it with any old standard ketchup. And the way to tell now would be identifying what the color of the line is on the bottle. And if the color didn't match, you'd know that it wasn't Heinz. So I wanted to get Rory's analysis on the behavioral science elements behind that and how it was such an effective strategy.
What's so interesting about that in part is that I reviewed sort of 150 years worth of spectator advertising. And of course, before the age of the supermarket, where you chose the brand yourself, it was fascinating how nearly all ads for packaged goods actually said, ask for it by name. Insist on this. Okay. And the reason was, I can still remember this. When I was about 5, my local shop still operated on the basis that you went to a counter and you asked for things. Okay. Now, to all of you, this seems incomprehensible, but the normal mode of the shop before a guy called Gold in Los Angeles effectively invented the supermarket and I think invented the shopping trolley. The normal mode of shopping was effectively you went to a counter, a bit like the 4 Candles sketch in the 2 Ronnies, and you asked for things and the shopkeeper fetched them for you. And there was a huge incentive for the shopkeeper to actually substitute lower cost ingredients. So you'd say, I'd like some Worcester sauce. And he'd go, well, I haven't got the Leon Perrins, but I've got this other stuff in, you see. And so effectively, there was always this kind of information asymmetry, and there was this asymmetry of interest, which is the consumer wanted the best possible. The retailer effectively wanted whatever he could get cheaply. And so the original purpose of most packaged goods advertising was to effectively reach over the customer to reach the consumer. And this is precisely a case of that, which is we can't necessarily shame we can't actually shame the actual cafe into filling up with Heinz, but we can get the consumer to notice when they've actually practiced this kind of invisible downgrade by putting, and it must happen with wine all the time, I'm sure.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, the repackaging stuff is an absolutely kind of highly common practice. And there are consumers who do it. There are consumers who restock, by which I mean, they buy Fairy Liquid for the bottle at Christmas, and then they effectively refill it with cheaper brands of Fairy Liquid.
Yeah.
And so, no, it's a very, very clever thing because it does rely on like a lot of great ideas, it relies on something peculiar, which is the fact that only Heinz ketchup is this particular color.
Yeah.
And that's why I think you can never completely generalize for marketing. James Webb Young always said, you have to understand in any advertising or marketing problem, there's a specific situation, and you have to investigate that. You can't just generalize for everything. Obviously, it wouldn't work in some categories where lots of things may be the same color. But it's a perfect case of kind of trademark protection at a second order level. I think it's ingenious.
I mean, one of the points you said there on the original supermarket and how that all worked with, we might not have this, but this might work instead.
Yeah.
There was that funny story that recently did the rounds. I'm pretty sure it went viral on Twitter. Was the one of someone that had done one of the Sainsbury's home delivery shops where they do sorry, we couldn't find you this item, so we've replaced it with this. He was cooking his Sunday dinner, and I think it was something like, sorry, we couldn't find you any potatoes, but here's a 4-pack of Foster's. Instead, was the adequate substitution that they decided to go for.
So you drown your sorrows. You drown your
Exactly.
sorrows. Yeah, okay, that's
very
fantastic.
smart.
How would the algorithm have done that? Because that's a very weird thing to have done, because I imagine they had some potatoes.
Yeah, strange.
Yeah, lovely.
But I thought that was brilliant. But another recent topic of discussion that we've had, we would obviously talk about it in your Mad Masters series, where you sit down with Shamil Thakrar from Dishoom. But I wanted to give the broader audience a bit more of an insight into this, of how Dishoom did become so successful. Obviously, Rory, you've spoken to them before. You obviously got an insight into this. So I did just want to ask, like, how did they come about, and what was their big key to success in the end?
I think, as with many business successes, there are multiple things, of which emphatically marketing is one. It's not only that they were very, very good and also different in the way that the restaurants were furnished. They were also slightly different in that they managed to cross that threshold between cafe and restaurant. So you didn't feel this kind of weird sense of obligation which is imposed by white linen tablecloths or things like that. Mm. So it was fundamentally very, very clever. A lot of it is the heritage of these Farsi cafes, which were opened in Mumbai, I think particularly prevalent in the kind of from the 1930s to the 1950s. They had a different story. They had a different kind of foundation myth. The food is sensationally good. Let's not gloss over that. It would be completely wrong for marketers to claim credit for things which are undoubtedly in the product, which is remarkably good and remarkably consistent and distinctive. Mm-hmm. But it also created a vibe which was fundamentally different from most Indian restaurants. Undoubtedly, they created queues, which is one of the most effective forms of marketing you can have for a place. But they also did some really clever things, like the great sort of holy grail of Indian restaurant success is, how do you get people to come in for lunch?
Yeah.
And it's difficult because in any group of 5 people, there's always one person who doesn't want to have an Indian meal at lunchtime. And so I notice, if you want a very good value Indian meal, go to Gymkhana, or one of the Michelin-starred Indians, or Tamasha or similar. Okay. And their set lunch will be insanely good value. Tamarind will be another one, I think. What's the other one I used to go to? Burnt down. I can't remember. I'll remember in a second. But they're very, very good value because it's difficult to get people in at lunchtime. And they did the wonderful thing of opening for breakfast.
Yeah.
Which was, if you think about it, you'd think, well, if you're having difficulty getting people in at lunchtime, opening for breakfast is crazy. But of course, if you understand complexity, the fact that you're opening at breakfast time means there are people in there at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and it seems less weird to go in. Often with Indian restaurants, if you go in at lunchtime, you're the only, you're pretty much the only patron, and it feels kind of weird and you don't feel quite right. And they managed to create this all-day vibe, which meant that they made a great success of breakfast, because they created a fantastic kind of naan. But you can buy it actually for home delivery and make it yourself at home, where you even cook the naan bread, which is fantastically enjoyable. They send you pots of dough and bacon and all the necessary, I think there's chili jam, all the necessary ingredients. Ooh. And you can actually make it yourself at home, which is fantastic. But there's something about it which is just really, really clever. I think there's a very great danger with lots of places when they look at opening hours, that they look at how much do we sell between 4 and 5. Therefore, if sales are declining between 4 and 5 in a tea room, they won't bother opening till 6.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes based on a false assumption. And I think the reason people aren't coming in is because if they get the impression you're about to close, they don't want to go into a coffee shop. Staff who work in coffee shops play this trick all the time. It's called getting the mop out.
Yeah.
And what you do is you put one chair upside down on top of another chair or on top of a table, and you lean a mop against the wall as if you're basically about to clean up and shut up, and nobody comes in, which means you can knock off early and get home. Because you can clean the machine early, you can take the the scum off the frothing nozzle, you can sweep up the bogs, you can get all that stuff done unsullied by any customers, so that you can knock off early without having to spend extra time clearing up after your closing time. And it's a trick that's often played by people in cafes, basically to get home early. And I think an awful lot of things with opening hours are actually, they're a product of complexity and non-linear forces. I think if you notice that, as a tea room, you're selling more between 2 and 3 than between 3 and 4, therefore it's not worth opening between 4 and 5. I think if you do open till 5, what you'll find is you sell a hell of a lot more between 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So it's not a simple thing where you can, human behavior is rarely a simple thing where you can use simple spreadsheet maths.
Yeah, agreed. It's kind of that whole concept that we spoke about with Alex Hormozy recently as well, the whole science of selling, isn't it? Everything that goes into how you can sell a product, when you can sell a product, and what the right market is for it.
And I think there's a fundamental problem which all business is now engaged in, which is under the influence of the finance function. What they're doing, and they're using technology to do this, and they're using, effectively finance to do this, is let's look at the cheapest way we can possibly sell to someone, and let's try and make everybody buy from us that way. The attitude of the marketer should be, how can we sell profitably to as many people as possible in as many possible, to quote Byron Sharp, buying situations. And there is a necessary cost of a sale. Okay. Now, in some cases, if you're really lucky, that might be zero. There are people who go online, pay full price for your product, you deliver it, you have to do no work whatsoever. It's all beer money.
Yep.
What I think is now happening is that the cheapest channel, which was once an option, is being made an obligation. So you see this with, for example, supermarkets imposing self-checkout on their customers. It used to be the case, which is, hey, well, obviously, come along and check your stuff out on the conveyor belt with a human cashier. But if you're in a hurry, if you're only buying 5 items, why don't you use self-checkout? And that was a pretty amicable state of affairs. And then the finance people have gone in and gone, God, look how much money we could save if we forced everybody to shop this way. Some people won't. Some people in some circumstances don't want to. There's a loss of human connection, which may actually impose a cost. In other words, if I don't distinguish anymore between Waitrose and Aldi because I'm self-checking out at both, why would I go to Waitrose anymore? That's a risk. But there's also been an epidemic of shoplifting created by this. Yep. And I think this business where we automatically frame anything in a sale that doesn't go into the product itself as waste, effectively, as a cost to be minimized, is an extraordinarily dangerous mentality. Really, really dangerous. Because the FT recently wrote a piece called How Did Customer Service Get So Bad? Well, actually, it's very similar to the debate in the long and the short of it. Okay. The long of it is usually deemed to mean brand advertising, but I think for service businesses, the long of it is often customer service. And because it's hard to prove or quantify the value of customer service precisely, it then gets underfunded relative to things like acquisition or bottom of the funnel activities, which are much, much easier to quantify. And yep. I think it risks being a kind of what you might call a kind of a systemic crisis, in that consumers overall are starting to lose faith in online commerce overall.
Yeah.
I think there's a problem of once bitten, twice shy. Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting point on the self-checkout I was reading recently, that it's the rise in shoplifting from it. They've taken whatever it is, 20% loss, or they've a 20% gain in shoplifting. The amount that they're losing in money from those products being stolen is still less than they would have to pay to have the amount of staff on to make sure that there wasn't as much shoplifting. So that's just looking at it from a monetary point of view.
Except over time, people get better at stealing.
True.
And also, it breaks down faith in the whole system if other people see people stealing. Okay, there's a whole kind of second order, third order thing we've got to factor in here. And then do you create an atmosphere where I once, I hate to confess this, once didn't pay for something deliberately at a self-checkout. Now, I wouldn't dream of nicking from a supermarket under any other circumstances, but I'd taken 3 minutes basically trying to scan this thing. No one would come along to help. I then had the unidentified object in the bagging area thing. I tried to call for someone's assistance to actually pay for the thing. And then when that didn't come, I just said, okay, 10 minutes of my time is worth, the £1.20. Yeah. It was not a high value. I wasn't setting out to like nick beluga caviar. What it was some trivial item. But I went, okay, you've had your chance to get me to pay for this. are not paying. Now, if people like me are nicking stuff, okay, albeit on one occasion with quite a lot of what I might call quite a lot of provocation.
Yeah.
I shouldn't confess to this online, should I? I'll get arrested. I can't remember where it happened, actually. It was somewhere really obscure, like, you know, a branch of, I don't know, Tesco in Leatherhead or something. So anyway, they may have me on CCTV. Who knows?
We'll chalk this down as a hypothetical situation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sure, exactly,
yeah. But yeah, nice. I mean, tying back into what you said before about how consumers may be losing faith, especially with an e-commerce world or an online world. There's an interesting point that I've come across recently. It was when I was buying, I'm quite into golf. I was buying a new golf bag. And there was this very nice golf bag. It's from Minimal Golf. They are quite cool. If you are into it, check them out. But how it was structured was their bags are based in the US. And it was something like £280 the golf bag was. And I thought, well, that's not absurdly above the value. It's actually a decent price for a golf bag. But then when I went to check out, it was £150 for shipping for it to come from the US to the UK.
Right.
And then that was what put me off. I ended up buying a different one based in the UK simply because I thought, well, $280 for the bag, that seems reasonable. $150 for shipping is that just seems off to me.
Psychologically, we see the price of the bag as contributing to the quality of the bag, whereas we see effectively the price of shipping as a lost cost. You know, it's the difference between paying a mortgage and paying rent. You know, one of them adds up to something, the other one doesn't. So that's why it's very common for places to offer free shipping in some cases.
Yeah,
for that reason. And that's why Amazon Prime exists. Because Amazon couldn't have really regular customers like me if they charged me £3 every time. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's really, and so they very cleverly, as do Selfridges, as do ASOS, they have a kind of scheme where you pay a certain amount every year and it covers unlimited shipping. In that way, they gain through repeat purchase more than they lose through effectively, you know, the subsidized cost of the shipping.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and as you said there, if you were to go to buy something and it's at a face value, £150 for shipping, £250 for an item, 400 for the if you were to pay 400 for the item and free shipping, you then seem like the item is almost exponentially higher in value or a much better product because now it's worth £400 and you'd be willing to pay that if it's a better product. But there's the free shipping element.
I agree, and I once, interestingly, I used to solve this problem very occasionally by getting stuff sent to friends in the US and getting them to forward them to me.
Yeah.
There's also the whole tax position and VAT position, which some of that shipping probably wasn't shipping. Actually, it was VAT or tax, because that you know, even if you're sending it by FedEx and even if it's a pretty big golf bag, that's a heck of a lot of money. So I suspect some of that was kind of tax, customs charges, and all that other stuff.
Indeed. Well, I mean, to tie in then for our last point of this second episode, it was a question that I got sent in a few times by people that listened to episode 1. And it was just simply a question from Rory of what would be your number one tip for people in marketing? Very, very broad, very vague question there. But Rory, if you could sum it up into one top tip, how would you put it?
Remember that you're an outlier in the organization, in that everybody else is trying to minimize the cost of transactions and you're trying to maximize the value of relationships. And so when you find yourself at cross purposes with the organization, never forget that you may be right and they may be wrong. Because I think marketing has suffered a crisis of confidence. I think it's got a kind of Stockholm syndrome where, faced with a spreadsheet and demands to be accountable, people, instead of saying there is a limit to how far valuable investment in long-term brand building, customer service, fame, lots and lots of things which are highly valuable to a business, cannot be precisely quantified. What's the value of being famous? It's impossible to quantify, right? Because it affects so many different things. It affects who you can recruit. It affects whether your CEO gets their phone calls returned. It affects whether you have to find customers or customers come and find you spontaneously. Okay, now it's fundamentally impossible to put a precise value on that. And so, and likewise, customer service. Generally, customer service repays itself in terms of evangelism and longevity and loyalty, two things which, even if you can measure them, are very slow to reveal themselves. And so the vital thing to remember is what Mark Ritson calls bothism. Yeah, there's a huge importance to measurement. No one's disputing that. It's vastly important to optimize the bottom of the funnel and to do short-term promotions. But don't make that your whole job just because it's the part of the job which is easiest to justify.
Well, very nicely put, Rory. Very nicely put. I'm sure that will answer a lot of people's questions. So yeah, if you've liked the second episode of the BS series, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and stay along. We will be trying to produce these as often as we possibly can to give you insights into the latest behavioral science happenings of the world. And if you do like these sorts of discussions as well, then you would very much enjoy the course that Rory and I do together, the Mad Masters course. So if you want any information on that as well, feel free to reach out to me or drop me a message on LinkedIn or via email, and we can get you on board for there. But until next time, we will see you later.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, Sam.